Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. Most of the teams at Champions have now been officially confirmed, but that does not mean that every team is happy about the way that things currently stand. There are two teams still fighting for their spot in the Americas, and both of those teams would be qualifying for the World Championship if the tiebreak rules in the Americas worked in the same way that the other regions do. Why is it different for the Americas? What does it mean for these other teams? And why are Cloud9 so frustrated about it with their final game on the line as well? $1 million loan to TALON Esports as well. That's a key drama of the day. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. We're going to start here. Here is Baby Bay. A nice little 1 versus 4 in Pro City. He says, you always got to believe you can bring it back. Will he still be on the starting roster for the World Championship? That is a very good question. And also, will he still be playing at the end of the Americas playoffs? Sen and G2, they're up there. They're guaranteed to be, well, in the upper finals as we know. And as a result, they're already going to be at the World Championship. And Baby Bay has been a key part of their run as of late. But G2 say, Leaf emoji, eyes emoji. And he goes, you'll want to play. And Leaf, it seems, might well be back. So we shall see about this one, whether Leaf does actually return. You know, they've not themselves teased it before. We did see that Leaf a couple of weeks ago was spotted in maybe a scrim with the team, but as Leaf confirmed the other day with, you know, he's now out of hospital, he's been struggling with the, you know, some complications, some Crohn's disease, and he's been suffering with energy, like depletion, let's say, and unable to play at the level that he would like, but it doesn't seem impossible that he maybe could return, and he was hopeful that his issues had been resolved after leaving hospital just the other day. So Baby Bay, I'm sure, will be going with the team to Paris, but Leaf presumably is still their ideal target man, and maybe there's going to be an opportunity for him to come back soon, hopefully sooner rather than later. Whether he's going to be well enough to play consistently from now until Champions, that is, I think, a slightly different question. Some roster drama elsewhere as well. We are going to see this start to unfold over the next few days with lots of changes the teams are looking to make. The spreadsheets are about to hit the timeline, there's no doubt about that, because it's going to be chaos. Now, Movistar, Koi, they are going to blow it up, and understandably so. Natank, Buddy G, Simos will not continue on the team. That's the latest rumour as of yesterday. There'll be plenty more where that comes from. I did want to quickly comment on this here from Les. Of course, a good start to this season on Vitality, then it swiftly fell apart. And he says, my plan is to continue the contract, which will end at the end of next year. As for returning to the Americas, I don't know. Returning to a Brazilian team is very difficult. Not 100% sure what he means by this sentence. I've tried to translate it a few different ways, and it doesn't really give me anything that makes too much sense, but feel free to translate in the comments anyway. So he kind of says, like, I might want to go back, but right now the Brazilian scene isn't in a great spot, and my salary at Lao was very good, but maybe he's talking about the money, the money situation anyway. So I get that, and he is on a contract with Vitality a little bit longer, so he says, like, I will be continuing there for now, and yeah, maybe it makes sense, right? But from a few different angles, I wouldn't be surprised if Les is, let's say, heavily considering his future at the moment. This also was tweeted from Sato, who, of course, had a difficult end on Leviathan, but he's done a great job, I think, for that team this season. Yeah, they went out in pretty bad fashion to NRG, and as he says, obviously, we didn't fit into the series at all. They played very well. But he says, glad to be able to thank the team, the work that they've done, and we'll see, right, where Sato goes from here, but I don't expect the level want to get rid of him anytime soon. They probably should be building around him going forward. He was a good find in challenges, and we have seen that work out in the Pro League as well, and a player who's also been pretty entertaining with some of his antics, let's say, up there on the main stage. Now, this was another big bit of drama. TALON Esports may go to the World Championship. If they beat RRQ in Tokyo in a couple of days, they will out-qualify DRX for the World Championship, which would be a mega result. Now, to, let's say, destabilize some of that discussion, we've got this from Hedgehog. Now, this is just hilarious to me, that we've got this guy called Hedgehog with Sonic the Hedgehog as his profile picture, and he's loaning $1 million to TALON Esports. But he says this, TALON approached me to borrow $1 million exactly 2 months ago. I think this is like, it's got to be like a crypto guy, right? They stated the loan would be for 1 to 2 weeks max, except it ended up being almost 2 months. So, first of all, it's really interesting, right? You're going to borrow $1 million for 2 weeks. what could, what's that for, right? Like, that's my first question. The principal was repaid on Friday, but they still owe me the interest and are ignoring DMs. So, and then he basically just ats these guys and says, a notice to all of your players and employees about your behavior, the fact that you still owe me money and you borrowed from others to repay me, which is, first of all, pretty interesting in the first place, which allows you to maybe draw some conclusions there. And he says, at Riot Games, take note. He then follows up and says, to give more context here, I was an investor in Talon and considered Shauna friends. He asked me for a loan on the 25th of June, which I gave him at 5% per annum for 3 weeks, even though he said that the money would be coming in 1 to 2 weeks. We then refinanced the loan on 20% per annum for 2 weeks because I still trusted him the money was coming back, but wanted more of a market rate interest. Then we refinanced again at an additional rate, and basically it added up to 75k that he owed in this period. Whoever's lending the money now, good luck, you're participating in a Ponzi. So basically what he says is that, Talon are borrowing from somebody else to pay him back, and then they're going to have to borrow from somebody else to pay those guys back, and, it's going to be a merry-go-round. Now, we'll see, right? Because Sean Zhang, top guy over there, he comes out with a statement and says, look, I'm the CEO, wanted to shed some light on this. This is simply miscommunication. They issued the $1 million back and didn't take into account the interest. As CEO, I take full responsibility of the miscom and will investigate internally where the issues happen and resolve it. The interest payment will be wired out tomorrow morning, irrespective of whether Hedgehog wants it, as banks are currently closed. It's unfortunate a tweet was put out in such a malicious fashion when this could have been resolved in a much more civilized way. However, after trying to reach out to Hedgehog to resolve it, I was met with the following response. So, anyway, he then says, boss sending you the money now, could you delete the tweet, got the confirmation. Obviously, Hedgehog initially says, well, hey, I was trying to reach out to them and they weren't responding. And he says, I don't want your money. You had your chance. I gave you plenty of chances to pay me back. And if I think for 1 second you could borrow 1 mil, but not 1,075,000, screw you. So anyway, that was his response. And then Hedgehog comes back and says, Miscom, you lied to me many times over the past 2 months about when the money was coming, including this instance where you said the money had been sent. And then I asked you for a confirmation screenshot. Stop tweeting. None of this makes you look good, you clown. And for those wondering, yes, the loan is legally binding with documentation. So this was on the 30th of July or whatever, it's a good few weeks ago, and he says, like, give us a chance, we'll get you the money back, like, I'm funding the money to his account or whatever. And then he says, anyway, you guys can read this at your own leisure. Point is, Talon could be in a bit of a predicament. And whether you believe the CEO or not, the reality is that they're borrowing $1 million on 2 weeks' notice. I think that Riot Games might want to have a quick look at it to see what's actually going on there behind the scenes. So let's move on because there's drama elsewhere. NRG and Cloud9, they are fighting for the final 2 spots in the World Championship. But I don't think that too many Cloud9 players will want to see this because this is an outrageous 1 versus 6 effectively. Cloves comes back from the dead and then still finds himself in a 1 versus 2 with that old champions Vandal, takes down Clove again and then pops the final deadlock with a 1-tap. I mean, you're not going to see too many better clips than that. So, NRG, Marder, are NRG the favourites against Cloud9? You would certainly say yes, but could they have both qualified? That is a possibility. So Imi says yesterday, and I actually wasn't aware of the different tiebreaker rules, but actually now makes a lot of sense. So Imi says, it doesn't make sense in a good way, but it makes sense why there's discussion about this. So in every other region's rules, Cloud9 and NRG would be at champs. Valen says, don't get nervous, just win. And Imi goes like, I'm not nervous, but I am stressed about the situation, right? Because this is the standings in the Americas. So G2 and Sentinels, 27 and 20 points. They've qualified a long time ago. MIBR are at 9 points, but they're not in the playoffs. So they are at 9, and that's it, right? They only scored 2 points this stage. NRG and Cloud9, they are guaranteed 4th. So one of them will place 4th, one of them will place 3rd or better, right? And if you place 4th, you get 3 points, which is why they've moved up from 6 to 9. And then if you place 3rd, you get 4 points. So at the end, when all is said and done, one of NRG and Cloud9, the winner, will have 10 or more, because NRG could go on to, win the losers finals, win the finals, whatever. But the point is that one of these teams will get to 10 or more points, and they will secure themselves a 3rd seed, and one of them will be stuck at 9. The question, though, is, okay, well, one of them's going to be stuck at 9, one of them is get to 10 or more, so why are MIBR making it over the other team at 9, right? Like, what's the tiebreaker there? Because MIBR are guaranteed to make it, but yet there's going to be a tiebreak against either NRG or Cloud9. Now, it turns out the tiebreakers are simply season head-to-head match record. So, and it turns out that MIBR have a positive head-to-head match record against both NRG and Cloud9. So, they're both at 9 points, but they will beat them on head-to-head. And as a result, MIBR will be there at the World Championship regardless. That is the rule. There is going to be no changing the rule. What you'll find interesting is that if I click on China and I go to the tiebreaker process, it looks like this. And, well, I can just zoom in a second so you guys can see the whole thing. Final standings from Stage 2. That is the primary tiebreaker in China, is the Stage 2 standings. If I go to EMEA and I look to the tiebreaker process, it's the same thing. It's the final standings from Stage 2 that make the difference. And in the Pacific, it's exactly the same thing again. So for some reason, I don't really know why it's like this in Valorant esports. But, and I could argue both ways. I actually think the Americas tiebreaker rules might make a bit more sense, but it is what it is. All the other regions are the same, but the Americas, for some reason, isn't. So what Imi is saying is that, well, hang on a second, in the other regions, MIBR had a terrible Stage 2. We would definitely be outplacing them in Stage 2, and therefore we would win the tiebreaker. What is the most fair tiebreaker in your opinion? Because MIBR win the head-to-head against both NRG and Cloud9 on the full season, and as a result they will make it, which you might consider to be fair. But also you could argue that the other region is fair because they are prioritizing performance now, right? Like, they want to, the other region's tiebreaker rules, let's say, lean towards the better teams going to the World Championship. Right now, who do I want at champs? If, let's say, I'm a fan of just the Americas, and I just want an Americas team to win or whatever, and I support all the Americas teams, would I want MIBR to go, or would I want NRG and Cloud9, who are right now clearly better teams than MIBR? You know, I'd probably want the latter, but also did Aspas and team deserve it over the season that they had, given their success earlier on? Yeah, you can also argue that as well. So I think it's really fascinating to see this play out in reality, because the other regions, this tiebreaker isn't even really relevant because the teams are, you know, kind of closer but also further apart, whereas for these deciding spots, it's very much up in the air. And the other thing that makes it feel a bit unfair is that MIBR aren't here in the playoffs. So NRG and Cloud9, they cannot beat them, right? It's impossible for NRG or Cloud9 to, let's say, beat MIBR and therefore actually take back the head-to-head result, or at least make it even with them, because they're not there in the playoffs. They can't even beat them to try and reverse the tiebreaker. So, look, the reality is that for both NRG and Cloud9, you've got to win. If you win, you're in. If you lose, you're going home. So very much into your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.